I am Joanne Verlinden, Chair of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and with the help of my colleagues here, I will be leading the meeting tonight. Before we begin, I want to explain some of the procedures we'll follow. I will introduce the case to be heard, name the board members who will be seated on the case. This will be followed by a presentation by the applicant or the applicant's representative having to do with the nature of the case, the reasons for requesting a special permit or a variance or an appeal. Following that, board members may ask questions regarding various aspects of the case. At any point in this process, the applicant or the applicant's representative may request a continuance to make appropriate revisions to the application. If a hearing is to be continued to a later meeting, a motion is required and shall contain a date certain for the hearing to be resumed. Any revised or supplemental information for the board shall be submitted no later than the Thursday prior to the next regularly scheduled meeting. When board members have finished with their questions, we'll open the meeting to abutters and other interested members of the public to hear their questions or concerns, and the applicant or the applicant's representative may certainly respond to them. When it appears there are no more questions, we will close the meeting to the public, and the board may then discuss the application and, when ready, proceed to a readings of the findings of fact, which will be followed by a motion to either approve or amend the findings, and a vote will follow that. Next, there will be a reading of the conditions, again followed by a motion to approve or amend the conditions, and a vote will be taken. The last order of business in each case will be to decide whether to approve or deny the applicant's request, and a vote will be taken. To grant approval of a special permit or variant or appeal requires a vote in favor by at least 4 of the board members who are seated on the case. At any point before a final vote is taken, the applicant or applicant's representative may ask that the application be withdrawn without prejudice. This means that the case is not dismissed forever and that the applicant can try again at a later time with better data or more information for the board's review. Our first case for this evening is case number ZBA 2026-1, 155 rear, Nauset Light Beach Road, map 23, parcel 31. George Brencher IV and Bonnie Patten, owners and applicants, seek site plan approval, a special permit and/or variance pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 8, and Eastham Zoning Bylaw, Section 4.3, alteration of a non-conforming single-family structure. They want to demolish a pre-existing non-conforming dwelling on a pre-existing non-conforming lot and construct a new dwelling, and of course, a vote will be taken. Seated on this case will be Martin Ridge, Doug Bird, Bob Sheldon, Justin Kennington, and myself. So, Ben, are you speaking for the, okay, owners?
Thank you, Madam Chair. May I?
Please begin.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
For the board, my name is Brencher. See you all again. I don't know if it's in here. I represent George Brencher and Bonnie Patten, who are online to answer any questions you might have. Also online with me is Jeff Cronin, who's our project engineer from Ryder Wilcox, and also is Stuart Lathers. Start over. Also with me is Stuart Lathers, who's our project architect. Interesting property. It's out on Nauset Light Beach Road rear. I don't know how much you're able to see with the snow. It's a property that's off of Nauset Light Beach Road rear. You come in on the north side of the property, and then the property sort of falls away from you as you come onto the site. Older structure that was built in 2 sections. One was pre-1959, and then there was a second section, which is a section closer to you when you come down the driveway, which is a garage under with some living space on the main floor, which was built about 1970. This property has a little bit of an unusual history. You know, we don't see this a lot, but you all know that your own bylaw, section 2.4.1.7 says that you cannot increase the size of a residential structure in the National Seashore by more than 1.5 times the habitable floor area that was there in 1959. You've probably seen from the National Seashore computation sheets, this property is already over that number that you would have been allowed to have by about, I think it's 187 square feet. And the reason for that is because the modifications that were done to increase the size of the house in 1970 were prior to the adoption in Eastham of your bylaw that said you can't increase more than 1.5 times. So once the town passed that bylaw, and I can't remember when it was, this property became pre-existing non-conforming with regard to its habitable floor area. So the structure is also non-conforming on 3 sides with regard to its setbacks from the roads. The existing structure right now is it's 28 feet from C Street, which is on the east or the right-hand side of the property looking at the plan. It's 15.9 feet from the southerly lot line, and it's 33.1 feet from D Street. And actually, I'm sorry, it's 37.2 feet from 3rd Avenue, so it's non-conforming on 3 sides. Part of that is because the property has paper roads on 2 sides, the east and the west, and then the actual Nauset Lake Beach Road rear on the north, which isn't really in the layout of the road. So in your zoning bylaw, roads create a 50-foot setback requirement from lot lines, which is somewhat significant. So the house is non-conforming on 3 sides dimensionally. It's non-conforming as to its habitable floor area, and it is, but otherwise it's a conforming structure. Oh, and the lot at 13,600 square feet is non-conforming as to the minimum lot size in the National Seashore, which requires 3 acres, but it's also, I believe it may be not conforming as to frontage, but I have to look up that number on 3rd Avenue. The proposal, what George and Bonnie want to do is they want to remove the house. You've probably seen it, it's very old. It's not in great shape. It's been in the family for a lot of years. They want to keep it as a generational property. Stuart has designed a modern structure that would sit on the lot in essentially the same area, but it's going to be closer to 2 lot lines, a little further away from another lot line. So the proposed structure is going to be 29 feet from the front yard line, where it was 33.1 originally. I'm sorry, 37.2. It's going to be 21.9 feet from D Street on the west side, where it was 33.1. It's going to be 15. It's going to be. I'm sorry. It looks like 11.2 feet. I'm sorry, 16.2 feet from the southerly lot line, a little bit further away from the southerly lot line, and then it's going to be 28 feet from the right-hand side, C Street, where it was 33.3. We've done the research on this property. The roads in the east and west are paper roads. They're not built out. The owners owned the center line of both those roads. So, functionally, they have more area on those sides than you would normally think, because they own the fee interest on the way to the center line. The existing structure, and this is where it gets more interesting. The existing structure has 2,949 square feet of site coverage. And the reason for that is because the lower level of this building has more than half of its height exposed to the world. And you define site coverage in your bylaw, in the newer version of the site coverage, as not including basements. And basements are just defined as structures that have more than half of their height, below ground. So we have 2,949 existing site coverage. What we're proposing is 1,991 square feet of site coverage. So it's actually a reduction in site coverage. The legal effect of that is that it removes this property from planning board site plan review, because site plan review in Eastham is triggered in the National Seashore for an increase of 200 square feet or more of site coverage. So although the habitable area of the structure is increasing, the actual site coverage is decreasing. You have, as part of your package, elevations for the structure. I think they're attractive. Your own opinions are important in the approval of this. The site itself, because of the way it's oriented, it's a house that's very difficult to see from the road. You come up to the property from the west, northwest. It's fairly heavily screened, and then there's a driveway that drops down. So the only real view of this property is going to be really from the properties to the south, which are sort of across the valley and then up again. I don't know if you went and looked and saw what the view was, but they're a good distance away. The structure at 991 square feet of site coverage is consistent in the area with what houses are. So we're hoping that and also we've included with our application the lighting cut sheet showing the downward lit lighting that's going to be there for the property. They're going to essentially leave the property vegetated in the same manner that it is now. It's sort of a wild area, so there'll be a little bit of replanting on the east side where they're having to take some stuff out, but essentially it's going to stay the same. So we're hoping you approve it. And I hope that's enough of one long sentence for you to.
Okay,
Oh, and we'll try to answer any questions. I've got my design team here. They can answer questions that you
right.
have.
Questions, anybody?
I want to start off with a basic one. There's some education I could use. Maybe this is from town. Ben, I'm sure you'll have thoughts on it. But isn't there a significant difference in the seashore of demolishing a house and building a new one as opposed to expanding or remodeling the existing structure? And if so, how does that difference play into what we're trying to do here?
It used to be. They say what's old is new again. When I first started practicing, in 1990, we used to have the one wall standing doctrine, or the incorporation of a part of a house into a new design to try to keep something in the old house. That actually went by the wayside as a result of a heavily litigated case in the town of Eastham, the J. Davis case. So it really depends on the definition of what an alteration is in each particular town. But every town that I work in, alteration is considered to include either movement of a structure, replacement of a structure, or a combination thereof. So the seashore operates under the same zoning code, meaning there's no difference in the seashore. They have their own federal regulations on takings and suspension, but, and Paul can correct me if I'm wrong, but, in the town of Eastham, an alteration includes a demolition and replacement. So it doesn't differ in the seashore.
Does that?
Yeah, I concur with that. We've
cool.
come across this in earlier cases.
There's many examples.
So,
There's the
please,
education.
and I would hate to see us go there. I mean, it used to be.
I just wanted to get that level of education. So
It used to be, and it used to be that when you applied for a zoning permit in the town of Eastham, you had to provide a construction protocol. So the board could look at it and determine whether or not it was in fact, and what happened in the J. Davis case was, and I represented him, he came in and presented a case in which he was gonna leave one wall standing. And then one cold winter day, that last wall came down. So, maybe my mistake, I don't know. But we came in and reapplied to the board for the exact same house and showed it as demolition. And the board really couldn't turn them down, but they did. We went to litigation, and about a month before the case went to trial, somebody else came in with a similar project, and the board gave a unanimous approval to a house that was being demolished. And so we took that evidence, went back to the land court, and settled the case, and ever since then, that construction protocol has gone by the wayside. So, J. Davis paid for that, so. But that's, I hope that answers your question, Justin.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Questions, comments? Okay.
Just a question. When they were thinking about the design of the building, did they consider any other alternatives that are kind of more in keeping with a traditional Cape Cod look of a house? Because I will be honest with you, when I think about the character of that area, and you're right, with the snow, it's hard, but given the character of that area of being kind of rural and old Cape Cod, this jumped out at me as not fitting, especially the wall of windows on one side. So did they think about some other options?
The answer to that question is I don't know, and I can ask them to step in. I can tell you from personal experience, my father's an architect who's been dead for 40 years. He designed probably 75 structures in Orleans, Eastham, Wellfleet, P-Town, and Truro, all of which are under federal protection orders, and they're all mid-century modern. So Eastham, I don't think has the same experience as Truro does, for example, or Provincetown, but that architectural style, and as you move around Eastham and go down, especially on the Bayside, you're going to see a fairly significant number of flat-roofed structures of that type of design. So I don't think it's out of keeping with the architectural history of the town. You have to form your own opinion as to whether you think the window schedule is something that you don't think is in keeping with the neighborhood. So my guess is, and George or Bonnie Stuart can jump in on this, I think this is the type of house that they wanted to design to replace what's there. Right now, what's there is a Cape Cod style structure of fairly conventional design, older. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it's a big change.
Yeah.
And I've walked the streets, and there are a few of the flat roof houses, but a lot of them are on the bayside, and they're more secluded, and they don't have all the windows.
Cottages.
Yeah,
Camps. Right.
at least that I've seen, but you guys are,
Well, the Cape Cod modern design is classic. I mean, there's a organization that preserves those, and there's been a number of them in the seashore, particularly up in Wellfleet and Truro.
Yeah, it goes back to the 50s,
It's
doesn't
back
it?
to the 50s. In fact, in Eastham, there's a whole bunch of them. There's one on Campground Road. There's a whole bevy of them over off of Bridge Road, Crosby Village. Not Crosby Village Road, but Crosby Village. There's all these little houses that are that way. And it's really an amazing style. Now, historically, it was done, big glass, but they were single pane. They were historically not really great winter houses, if you will. But the style itself is very classic for this part of the Cape.
Yeah, I have a few comments. I will first concur that the style of the house doesn't bother me. In fact, we have to drive by Nauset High School on the way to this house, which is also contemporary design. I do have some consternation about the idea that everything was we're playing between two sets of rules, between the seashore rules to calculate what's habitable space and then the town's rules just to decide what's site coverage. And pretty much every advantage seems to be going your way as far as, yes, this space counts, so I can make my house bigger, and no, the space doesn't count, so it's not too big. So we both can agree that we're in this wedge space. Where I have issues with the design, it comes back to section 4.4.4, which is the compatibility and of the desirable character of the neighborhood, including views and vistas. And then 4.4.8, which is the adequate control of artificial light. I also don't agree with you that it's only visible from the road. This house is clearly visible from the lighthouse. And I think Nauset Light is, in my view, the most iconic site we have on Cape Cod. And I think it's probably one of the most recognizable structures we have that people from around the world would recognize. That's Eastham. And so when I look at the views and the vistas, and I was there today, and I'm standing with one hand on the lighthouse, and I can clearly see this project site. I can see the garage doors up onto the roof, and I took a few pictures, but I don't think we need to show them. So I think it does take consideration that this house is very visible from the lighthouse land. Anybody who wants to go up and take a photograph of the lighthouse, especially in the evening, you're going to see light spill. And that brings me to section 4.4.8, which is the adequate control of artificial light. And as we can agree, the south facade is primarily a glass wall. There's the equivalent of, I think, 12 or 13 slider doors facing the lighthouse. And the trees between, everyone knows that the trees within a couple hundred feet of the edge of the cliff, they're all dying, and they'll continue to die. That's pretty much anybody who walks around here knows that trees can't grow this close to the cliff. And this house, I think, is roughly 300 feet from the cliff. So whatever trees are between the lighthouse and the project will be going away. In fact, I have some pictures of trees that are right there, not on your site, but on the house that's for sale next door that are all dying and dead. So my contention is that the amount of glazing that faces the lighthouse is unacceptable, and I wouldn't vote for this project with that amount of glazing. On top of the issue that the secondary issue is that on the lower level, which is it a basement now? Or won't be a basement? In the future, it will be a basement. It's not a basement now, but it will be. That there's at least 4 access points with slider doors. I don't know how that contends with future development of the basement to turn that into habitable space and how we prevent it from getting larger in the future. But those are my 2 issues are how do we control that this house doesn't get any bigger? And how are we going to control for the light spill and the light pollution, which will be visible from the lighthouse? When it comes to some of the other topics, the design, the style, I'm fine. This is someone's taste. This is what they want to do. That's fine. I think it's going to have breathtaking views of the ocean and the lighthouse when it's done. But those two issues with light
And further expansion.
and further expansion would be a no-go for me.
And I would have to concur with that. The house has already gone past the 50% that the seashore allows. I think you calculated it's at 134% of increase.
I'm not sure, in what way that.
When we talked the other day, you were saying that, something that, like that.
Potentially, yeah, if you weren't counting the renovations that happened in the 70s.
Right,
yeah.
right. And I agree with Marty. I think that's an awful lot of glass. So I don't know how the owners of the present house and the future house feel about those two issues. The possibility of at some future point converting the lowest level to habitable space. I don't know whether it'd be a guest accommodation, a studio apartment, something like that. And we'd like to see some reduction in the glass area so that we don't have that just overwhelming interior light spill.
Yeah. And I guess I probably should have started with a few positives, meaning setbacks.
It doesn't matter to me which order they go in.
Because
Just
like,
where the butt
we're
is,
talking
yeah.
about, we have setbacks on three sides.
Yeah.
You and I have spoken about the paper roads in the past. You have a
Right.
50-foot setback. So even though you're going from, in some cases, 31 to 29, if we were being very strict about the setbacks, you're 50 feet, even though you have a C into the middle of the road.
Right.
But the setbacks, the size of the house, those are two things that are in here. But I come back to the, this is in direct sight. I think we measured it, it's 100 yards from the lighthouse currently.
So Martin, when you were there, if this was built in its current structure, if you were standing at the base looking at the lighthouse, would you be able to see this house? behind
Absolutely.
it? That's what I thought.
The current garage doors, if I'm looking at the right side, the current garage doors would be one of these sliders.
Right.
Or potentially this spot here, but this is the current garage is here.
Yep.
And you can, I sent a picture, you can zoom in on my picture and you can see the garage doors clearly with one hand touching the lighthouse.
You're much more articulate than I am, but I think you're making the exact case that I was making.
Okay,
It
thank you.
completely changes the look and feel of the lighthouse if you can see this house with all the windows behind it.
If they were entertaining in the house and you went to take a picture of the lighthouse in the evening, it's very likely you're going to have a background light.
Right,
That's my point.
right.
This lot to the south, I should have looked this up myself before, but that's I'm guessing undeveloped seashore property, the immediate abutter there.
One, like this little skinny one.
Oh,
He's only this shape.
right.
He's got four, and then these is. Good question. I'm not sure who owns the small lots. Ben?
Right, because there's
5,000
nothing
foot
there.
lots just to
The
the
developed
south.
properties, to the east.
Yeah. I'm talking about the stuff that
Yeah,
abuts this
I
property.
I
It looks
believe there's- I
looks
believe there's-
undeveloped.
Yeah.
I know I'm not supposed to interrupt, but I'm the owner of that piece of property.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
And you would like to say something, sir?
Well, yes, I don't, is this the appropriate time for me to say a few things?
yes, I believe so, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, because with the way you spelled it out before, I wasn't sure. But so I guess, I have some of the same concern. I want to be a good neighbor. Don't get me wrong. And I'm all for people improving their living space. But I did have the same concerns when I saw the design with the light, because I own that undeveloped piece of property directly behind this, but also I own the two houses that are on the other side of that undeveloped property. And when I saw the plans, and I did notice all of the windows, and I had the same concern that the board has as far as the light. there because I think it would adversely affect our property as well. And the other concern that I had, and again, wanting to be a good neighbor, but I'm not really sure what the intent is of the owners of the property with these improvements, but they're adding a very large deck on the first floor of the property. I don't know how many square feet it is because I couldn't see the dimensions on the plan that I had available to me, but it's very large. And then there's another roof deck that, again, wasn't dimensioned on the plans, but just inferring from what the first floor plan is, it looks like the roof deck is maybe something like 750, or maybe it's less. Maybe the architect there could tell me how big it is. But the other concern that I had about it was what's the noise level that's going to be generated there with the outdoor space. I'm all for enjoying the outdoor space. It's a beautiful area where we have our houses. You want to take advantage of the summer months and be outside, obviously, as much as you can, especially after living through these couple of months that we've had. So those were my main concerns. And then the other thing that I just wanted to get a better understanding of, for myself too, with our properties is you're talking about having to satisfy both the town of Eastham and the seashore. But when I look at the seashore in their Part 27 of the Cape Cod National Seashore Zoning Standards, in paragraph 23.3, it talks about these setbacks, right? And 50 feet from the street or 25 feet from abutters, but you've got an unconforming lot here. And even in that paragraph, it ends by saying, that you need to keep those, but then it can't be or less than such lesser setback or distance requirements already in existence for such dwellings or accessory structures. So you're already in nonconformance on two sides. Now it's going to be even worse than what it was. And so I don't know if there's anybody here from the National Seashore, but I'd be curious to understand how this new design is not directly in contradiction to their standards, and how this new design wouldn't, kind of trigger this, which nobody wants to talk about, but the acquisition by condemnation that they talk about in their rules. So anyway, I've said a lot, and I'm sorry I kind of rambled on there, but those are my concerns.
Bruce, you mentioned you own two other houses out there. Are these the ones I'm looking at the map off of Skylark Lane? Am I looking in the right spot?
Yes,
Okay.
and they're both. I have the plan here. And I don't know the one that the improvements are on. That both houses are on 23 dash. This is such a small print, but I think it's 035 maybe. Does that sound right? It's so you have like a kind of an L-shaped lot that this improvement is on, the one we're talking about. Then there's a small L-shaped kind of L-shaped in the other direction. That's the unimproved lot. And then the next one to the south is the one that our two houses are on.
And what are the addresses of your two houses?
Well, they're both the same address. It's 935R Cable Road.
Okay, we got it. Right.
Yeah.
It's the ones we thought it were. Thank you.
Okay. So sorry I rambled on there, but I'd be interested in your opinion of what I had to say there.
I was also curious about if the National Seashore had a representative that had weighed in at this point. It looks like they have to sign off after, or kind of in line with what you were saying, Martin, to have someone walk out there and weigh in on their thoughts about how it will impact such a visually and aesthetically important landmark.
If I may, on that issue, our practice is to provide copies of applications to the Seashore when we file them, as a courtesy. and notify them of the hearing dates. The Seashore's role in this is, they have two roles. One is as an abutter. You know, they're as an abutter to the property, and entitled notice, they have the same rights as anybody else, as the gentleman just spoke, to weigh in on the project. The other right they have is if they believe that you have violated what the gentleman referred to, 37 CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, they can, if they want, revoke the certificate of suspension of condemnation. So they don't have direct approval authority over the project. Generally speaking, I find the Seashore doesn't come out and do site visits that we know about before, but they will, on many occasions, provide correspondence about what they're looking for. Historically, the concerns that they have are not generally architectural. They're concerned about encroachments on their own property. They want to make sure that driveways aren't encroaching. Oftentimes, the last boards to require that we put concrete boundaries in, things like that. They're also, of late, they've been concerned about multiple dwellings on one lot. So they will weigh in on applications if they see, for example, a second dwelling unit or something like that. So, but there's no direct tie between the two. So.
Thank you. I did want to address, was it Bruce's question about the setbacks?
Yep.
So Bruce, the reason we're here is because the house is already pre-existing non-conforming when it comes to setbacks. And a special permit requires us to look at that, and as long as the additional changes to the setback are reasonable and not detrimental to the neighborhood, you know, which is, if you had a house right next door to them, if the property was developed, it might be a little bit of a different discussion. But the rule that we've been using in the past was, as long as it's not significantly more detrimental when it comes to setbacks, you know, and there's some give and take on some of these setbacks are moving back, some of them are moving forward. So that's what we'll take into consideration. I'm not saying how we agree on it, but in the past, or I should say, the zoning board, very often we're allowing projects to happen within the setback after taking into consideration of from the neighbors as well. Do you know if it's coming any closer to you, or is that the one setback that it's not moving?
It sounds like that is the one side that is maybe getting a foot or two.
It was less than a foot, I believe, that it's
Less than a foot.
improving.
So-
However, I think it's notable that, you know, right now, where the garage comes 15.9 feet close to that southern border, there's only, what would I say, I'm eyeballing, it's not a dimension here, but 12 or 15 feet of encroachment width, if you will. Whereas now what they're doing is they're saying, well, now we're 16 feet, 0.2 away from the border, but it's the entire width of that deck that's probably 30, 35 feet wide. And also likely a source of is that a pedestrian if they're just walking on their own deck? I don't know. People being out on the deck. I think that bears consideration. It feels disingenuous to me to say, look, we're improving, when, you know, okay, you moved it 4 inches and you made it a lot wider and probably noisier.
If I could address a couple of the comments before I forget, because I think, Martin, you make some great points. I mean, you really do. And I think between you and Joanne, you've kind of hit on what I think are the areas that this board should be looking at, which is the intensity of the use, as well as the, and I think the standard is correct. Is this going to be substantially more detrimental than what's there? In looking at the standards for grant, I have to disagree on one point. When the bylaw talks about compatibility of the proposed structure with surrounding land uses so as to minimize harmful impact or conflicts with existing desirable neighborhood character, including views, vistas, and aesthetic values, I don't think that means a view of the house. I think that means what impact does this have on views and vistas that the neighborhood enjoys generally? Meaning, for example, you know, if you're building a house and people can see through this to the water, they can see a vista. So I think a view of someone's house is something that we take for granted, meaning we see everybody's houses generally anyways. We're wandering into an aesthetic design question as opposed to, does this project somehow going to interfere with somebody's existing view of what's out there? Meaning, as if people are walking along Nauset Lake Beach Road rear and they have a view of the ocean or a view of a woodland, is this going to interfere with that in some way? I think that the question of whether or not the increase in the habitable space is detrimental is a very rational and legitimate question for this board to be looking at. And I'm taking notes here about the size of the structure and its location. I think light, there's a lighting bylaw. We have to contain light on site. So if you can look out from the lighthouse and see lights in a window, I think that's something we have to address in terms of your use. There is a significant amount of glass on that side of the house, so that's something we're going to look at.
And I would say in the
Yeah.
past, and a couple of years ago, we did have some homes redesigned due to, the number of light windows that they had overlooking the neighbors' homes.
Sure.
So there's precedent on that. I understand what you're saying on the vistas. Normally, if you're blocking the view of the bay or something, you could say that. But I think that the lighthouse is so iconic, and people take pictures of it all the time, and this house is now going to be in the background of everybody's picture. So to me, it does affect the character, including the views and the vistas and the aesthetic value of that general neighborhood.
I can tell you.
I know, I'm just saying that's my opinion.
No, and I'm not going to separate, I don't think I'm going to be able to call that out of the herd of what the board's looking at. But I can tell you from going to the appeals court that Charlie Trombley ruled that there is no right to a view from national seashore land. And, this was the Blash House in Wellfleet. We get dismissed for lack of standing. The court said that the seashore came in and said, you can see this house from our walking trails, therefore, and the court said, no, you can't look at that. So I'm not trying to buy a vote here.
I know.
And I know I'm dancing on the head of a pin here. What I hear the board saying is that this may be too intensive, and that the glass that we're looking at on the south side is a lot.
Right.
And that secondarily, or maybe not secondarily, that the use of the property with the decks could create some type of use that we think may be too intensive for the neighborhood. Do you feel like I'm stating that accurately?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Understood. I'm pushing you along because I have a hearing at 6 in the morning, so I already, we kind of set this up to
I
see
think,
what we're going,
I think you're right in the right space, that we're not trying to,
Okay.
I think the project looks nice. I'd be proud to see the project in town. But I think when we look at the amount of decks that are overlooking the neighbor's
Sure.
house that's here, as well as the amount of glass, there's a lot of glass in the basement, first of all. So I think if we come up with a number to say we want to reduce the glazing, I'm not going to say, I don't like this door or that window.
I understand.
But an overall reduction in glazing is what I would like to see.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm really sorry to try to control the process.
No, that's okay.
Joanne. I really am.
It's
just
okay.
a matter of I can't be late. Is there anything else that the members think that we need to look at? And I know you have to take public comment. I'd like to hear that, so if there's any more.
I don't think so. The board at this point doesn't have any more questions or comments. I'd like,
Just check with the public.
yeah, and I'd like to see if anyone in the audience here has some concerns or questions.
And before we jump to that, I don't want to add a point, but I just want to emphasize, 'cause I don't know that you captured it in your summary just
Okay.
now. The idea that as it sits right now, maybe this is a basement and maybe that doesn't count as square footage, but my gosh, that sure looks like an obvious place to add livable space. And let's just make sure that's been considered. Maybe legally in our zoning bylaws, you could do whatever you want down there and it's still going to not be site coverage. Man, I didn't want to use the wrong vocabulary term there. Okay, but we did flag that, and so put that in your
I understand.
cogitation.
Okay, thank you, Chuck.
Speaking of
Okay,
vocabulary.
Hi, this is Ben Adner. I'm at 925 near Bruce, the other house locally. That's really my only concern. That's a very livable basement, and they've done a nice job of managing the 50% rule. But that's a pretty big habitable space, and with all those doors going outside, that's a big house. That's my feedback.
Okay, thank you.
One comment I haven't brought up. I've been trying not to confuse either myself or the board with this. The seashore bylaw says you can't increase by more than 1.5%, but then you can have 50% of that new number for accessory space. The two systems don't work well together, but what you're allowed to under the seashore bylaw, you can, if you have 1,000 square feet, you can go to 1,500 square feet, and then you can have 750 square feet of accessory space. We haven't tried to break this into accessory space or accessory buildings to confuse people, but just understand that those numbers kind of explain what we're allowed to do, and I think maybe I'll give you a little more information on that going in. So
That may very well be the answer. I just
Yeah.
it
No,
was a specific concern that came up, and I didn't hear it. And I didn't want you to come back at some
No,
potentially come back at some future point.
I want to hear
and
it all.
Totally miss
I want
it.
to hear
That's
it all.
all.
So thank you. Okay.
All right. Anyone in the audience want to say anything? Otherwise, I'm going to close the meeting to public comment, and we've got some thinking to do here.
If,
And we need
I
to.
wouldn't, sorry,
No, yes,
sounds like this is going to a continuance.
what do you think about that, Ben? And
So I want you to
I'm going
close the
I'm
public
going to
hearing.
I'm going to request a continuance for, I'm I'm going to request a continuance so we can take a look at that plan and come back.
Okay,
But just,
right.
only thing I wanted to say was I wouldn't keep the public hearing open because if there'll be more discussion.
keep the public hearing open.
You're just going
but
to
if
continue
we-
continue the public hearing.
We're not going to close this hearing, we're going to do a continuance on the hearing. For the next time they come back.
You don't have to
Yeah.
reopen the public hearing next time.
Oh, right, okay, okay, I see what you're saying, I'm sorry, misunderstood. Okay, so right now I need a motion to continue this case.
Can I ask Ben one more
Oh,
question?
sure.
So Ben, if, next month when you come back, and I know you're trying to run, are we going to work on two topics, glazing and square footage of the decks?
Well, those are two of the topics.
Yeah, those are the two topics that are most concerning to me, right? Okay.
Well, I understand, I'm also hearing habitable space, increase in habitable space.
In the lower level,
In lower levels, okay.
so I would add a third.
You wipe out all the doors in the basement and you've solved two problems at once.
Well,
Because the glazing is gone.
they should at least look at the height of the building as well, because if it's not as tall, it will be less of an adherence.
Well,
So,
the height is well under the 30 feet.
I understand that.
No, it's not 30 feet in the seashore.
It is.
I thought I read someplace it was 28 feet in the seashore, but
I'll look at that, maybe you're right.
either way, it's okay. But, and it's sort of in a hole, but,
And it's in a hall.
I think Doug was just saying, here's another approach, but
okay.
meanwhile, we'll let the architects fight that out, I suppose.
Meeting date, March 5th, all right. I would like to have a motion to approve moving case number ZBA 2026-1 to our next meeting, which would be March 25th.
Fifth.
No, March 5th.
5th, March 5th, sorry.
I'll move to continue this case to March 5th.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, and Marty, okay, all in favor, please.
All right.
All right. That vote is 5-0, so we will see you again in March.
Thank you all, thanks, let's see.
Yep,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
okay. Let me put some of this away.
Just a second. That's a lot of-
All right.
Neighbors on me? I hadn't, put neighbors on there, I hadn't.
Me neither. Should have. Okay, just a minute here while we're getting organized. All right. Our second case tonight is case number ZBA 2026-2. Velma Decker, trustee, applicant, and abutter at 625 Schoolhouse Road, has filed an appeal pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 48, Sections 8 and 15, from the building commissioner's decision to issue a building permit number RBP 25-311 for property located at 4020 Meetinghouse Road, map 9, parcel 130, owned by Gary Doolittle. The appellant seeks a reversal or a modification of the building commissioner's issue of the permit for the building of a detached garage, and a vote may be taken. Seated on this case will be Martin Ridge, Doug Bird, Bob Sheldon, Justin Kennington, and myself. Before we hear from Ms. Decker, I would like to remind us of sort of the background of this case. On July 16th, 2025, Gary Doolittle appeared before the planning board to request site plan approval. That case number was PB 2025-6, and that was for building a two-car detached garage at 420 Meetinghouse Road, and that was approved by the planning board. On October 2nd, 2025, Ms. Decker, who lives at 625 Schoolhouse Road, appeared before this zoning board of appeals, and that was our case number ZBA 2025-4, to appeal the planning board's decision. The zoning board upheld the planning board's decision, but added some additional findings and conditions. On November 18th, 2025, our building commissioner, who's with us tonight, issued a building permit number RBP 25-311 to Gary Doolittle, authorizing the building of a two-car detached garage on his property at 420 Meetinghouse Road. This case regarding the building of a detached two-car garage has already been reviewed thoroughly and approved by 2 regulatory Town of Eastham boards. The Zoning Board of Appeals is now being asked to revoke or modify the building commissioner's issuance of the permit to build the two-car detached garage. The focus of this hearing tonight is centered only on the building permit. This board will not reevaluate the project. We will not reconsider the planning board's actions. We will not make new factual findings beyond assessing whether or not an error of law or a misapplication of zoning bylaws has occurred. Matters concerning building code are not within this board's purview. Appeals related to 780 Massachusetts Building Code are within the jurisdiction of the State Building Code Appeals Board, not the Eastham Zoning Board. Concerns regarding site work conducted under prior permits are not properly before this board. The scope of this appeal is limited to building permit RBP 25-311 as issued. Matters related to the site plan review conditions, landscape requirements, or procedural concerns with the planning board process are not within the scope of this building permit appeal. Matters related to the site plan conditions are within the planning board's enforcement authority, not the zoning board's. The ZBA's authority in a permit appeal is limited only to reviewing compliance with objective, measurable zoning standards, not the criteria of site plan review under Section 10.3 of the Eastham Zoning Bylaw. Your turn.
I appreciate the history on all of this, but this evening, I will present a recent finding from the permit showing revised site coverage greater than allowed under 7.3 site coverage limits that should have precluded the construction of such a large building. And I think this is in fact material, and it's newly discovered and was not really disclosed to the zoning board, so I'd like to present a summary. It's not working.
I don't know where it is.
Okay, thank you. But I think this is material new finding. I don't know how to pass this around. It is a material finding.
This is new tonight.
Yes, and I apologize for just finding it. I was looking under,
Thank you.
just to verify that I had found those large area, whatever, the largest building in the area. And I think since this is on the permit, and it was not considered in all of these prior proceedings, it is material. So, other thing I'll go to is how excavations performed well within statute of limitations for zoning violations, and well after prior permits, so in between the 2019 permit and between the creation of the 2025 site plan, which I do not believe was necessarily understood in prior proceedings when people were looking at this history. So I'll show that, again, that should have precluded the construction of a large building, and in fact, these construction activities were performed after the last permit and are not included. So that's very significant in terms of the instructions we just heard. Okay, I will point out several non-compliances in the site plan, not in conformance with bylaw 10.13 on site plan compliance that leave open questions about retaining wall stability, design and extent, existing elevations prior to excavations, and most final elevations are missing from the site plan to lead to further concerns with building height computation and erosion risk to abutters. Also failed to abide by the,
That's not within our scope here. Site plan review conditions.
okay, but, well, the site plan conditions were not implemented in the permit.
That is not the focus of our meeting tonight. I'm sorry.
Okay. I do think that discrepancies on the permit between site plan and architectural drawings must be resolved before a non-conforming structure is built on the site. That should be something we can take care of with red lines. Okay, and I guess, again, I think I would disagree with prior findings and rulings that all of the conditions of setbacks and building height.
Ms. Decker, you wanted to appeal the granting of a building permit. That's what we're supposed to focus on.
Okay, and I'll
If
show.
if you have something specific to the building permit,
Okay,
these
well,
other,
the
these
building
other items that you are,
permit do include setback computations. It's in the permit on the site plan.
Yes.
And those are relative to the current conditions on the site, not that on prior permits. So I would like to go through the changes.
do you have a copy of the permit?
I have most of it. It's kind of,
Go through the setbacks is what was in her original complaint, was about setbacks, and the setbacks are relevant to the building permits. I'm okay for her to talk.
Okay, okay.
I'll say that, sorry, I'll say that. Yes, your description, good evening, Bill, and your description in your appeal, the main focus was on setbacks. Setbacks are relevant to the building permit. So I think that's valid for us to have a discussion on setbacks and how the setbacks were calculated, how they agree or disagree with the stamped engineering drawing,
yes.
versus
I
some of
appreciate
the older
that because
drawings
I
you
think there
gave
was
us.
misunderstanding on the timing of when some of these excavations occurred, and some of them were not on prior permits.
As part of her application. I've pulled it out. You provided 3 separate site plans in your appeal, correct?
Yes, just for reference, to show, in fact, that elevation changes that are material to the setbacks, and then in terms of the size of the allowable building, were not on a prior permit. They, in fact, occurred after the permit, and we have documented those in complaints to the town, and I believe they are material. So it's an issue on the permit and the assumptions made in the setbacks on the permit. I mean, the permit should be in compliance with zoning bylaws. And I think that there's a material discrepancy on the elevations used, whether it was a natural existing or for prior permits. And I will be able to demonstrate using those 3 site plans how that did not occur. Okay, just again, on looking at the site coverage of 17.71 is on the permit. That should not be in compliance with,
Oh, were we going to stay with setbacks first?
we
I'm
can,
just, there's so much material here, it's tough to talk about setbacks and then move over to site coverage.
okay, it's just the,
If you could, what your argument is that the building inspector used the approved site plan that was filed with the building permit. We agree, there's 10 years' worth of history on this site, but nevertheless, the building, not the building inspector, but our
Building commissioner.
building commissioner, thank you, would have used the site plan dated June of 2025. So I'm happy to hear you explain why that is not valid.
okay. And if we can look at Exhibit 4, which is a 2019 permit on page 108. Okay, that was what was permitted. And you can see at the base in here, there's a 44-foot base elevation. That was what was permitted and what was really authorized under this site plan. So I believe it is incorrect to then say, okay, we can go to a 40-foot elevation, because no one really approved that. There was no site plan review or due process that allowed the excavation of another 4 feet at the base of this kind of kettle hole down to the 40 feet on the current site plan. So I do believe that we lost due process rights in any kind of consideration in site plans in the past, because the Doolittle family had access to, heavy earth-moving equipment. They went out and excavated after the permit and after construction of the home down another 40 feet. And that 40 feet is.
We still can't, I'm sorry, we still can't go back and reevaluate what happened prior to this past summer when Mr. Doolittle wanted to build the garage. Okay, you're going back again to excavations that happened many years ago.
Up till 2024, which is not many years ago. And that was documented in a complaint to the town, which is on file as an exhibit in this package.
So that's looking at Exhibit 4. And then when I look at Exhibit 3, that's an older map.
Yes.
Okay.
So that
I'll let
older
other-
map just merely shows changes, again, prior to the 2019 permit, but the changes in elevation after the 2019 permit were never authorized.
Well, we're not going to rehash too much of that. Anybody else have any questions or the tack that we're not going in the direction? Anybody? So I'll say that I fully read your appeal. I've read everything you've submitted except for the piece of paper you just handed me earlier. In October, you and I walked the site together. I observed all the monuments on the site. I observed the walls. I observed the current site conditions. It was clear to me that, you and your mother love Eastham, love the culture of Eastham, and our charming little Eastham's been discovered. We're under quite a bit of real estate development. The cost of housing's more than doubled in the past decade. Back in October, at the ZBA appeal, you were present and you appealed that decision, and you asked for two outcomes. One was to document the walls exactly where they were, and the other was to have a civil engineer certify the walls. At that time, they agreed to document the walls, which now sets a baseline for any future civil litigation that might come from if the walls aren't. So we thought that was a compromise at the time. Where we are now is with this building permit. You mentioned about having due process again back in November. You had the opportunity to address the Eastham Zoning Task Force, and you brought several of these issues up to the task force. I think it was well received, and I think that information that you gave the task force informs their work as they move forward. So that was another opportunity that we had. From what I see, the primary complaint here is what we're talking about now, which is how the setbacks were calculated.
And the site coverage is very large.
The site coverage is a new issue that you just dropped on us a few
I
moments ago.
apologize, but I only found it
But let me
Tuesday.
stay on the two topics that I have here, because I spent a lot of time on
I
this.
appreciate
And
it.
and everything that you brought in, I sort of tried to say, here's things that I think could be relevant for this evening. We talked about the task force. We're talking about how they were calculated. And the setbacks is set by the height of the building above the average grade, and then that height becomes your setback, and I think the drawing is 20.3 feet. And the building inspector would have used the stamped plan, which is what I think was appropriate for him to use, the stamped plan. There's not another engineering report here that would counter that. However, in Exhibit 3 of your appeal is the land before Mr. Doolittle ever touched it. And if I apply the same methodology that the engineer used on the site plan, I come up with the same elevation and the same setback. In fact, the setback would get reduced at that time. If we went back to the virgin property before anything was touched, calculate the setbacks, I calculate the setbacks as slightly less than what they are.
Okay,
in the
I
building code. So
agree with that.
Okay, so that's
But
one
how about-
point. Let me just finish. I got one other point to make. So you agree with that? The other point that I think was mentioned many times in your appeal was the idea that it was a kettle pond or a wet kettle hole, and that it was holding water and so forth. So also last week, I spent some time at Town Hall. I went to the Community Development Office, and we went through the mapping software, which would have been the same that everybody uses, and there is no wetland designation for 420 Meetinghouse Road.
It's more
Those
just
are the best
flooding.
tools we have, and if that was a wet,
No,
that's
not a
something that the
wetland, I
state.
agree,
but-
but it's wet.
Right, but being wet and what we do about sites that are wet are very different from, a wetland site. So those are my 2 points that I took out of your appeal. The site coverage thing is new, I don't have time to read that right now, but I feel that if I'm looking back with your argument about how the setbacks were determined, and I go back and look at a map that was before Mr. Doolittle even owned the property, and it's de minimis, the change between the two, then the argument that at some point during the construction, the elevation was lower, and you want to point at that point in time and say, if I use this map, then that building permit would have been invalid. To me, that would be a miscarriage.
If I can, though, speak to the fact that the topography of the lot has been really dramatically changed. Viewscapes have changed. Everyone's looking at walls. Everyone has walls all over. A zoning board who had been presented with the original topography or even the altered topography may not have granted such a large,
We
so I
can't,
guess, change in elevation.
we can't speculate on what a different board might have done.
I agree. So that's why I focus on this site coverage, and also, I would like some reconsideration of the scale of this, because I don't believe people understood that it was over the site coverage limitations. So I do have comparable properties I would like to have entered into the record. I presented a long time doing this. I also did a quantitative analysis of 94 properties in the area, wrote them all down, and calculated summary statistics to show really the impact of what probably we should have discovered earlier on the fact that this site coverage is so huge. So I would like to at
I'm
least.
going to defer to the building department. Have you looked at the site coverage calculations that Velma has provided this evening, and do we have any feedback on them?
Just received them as well.
Yes, sir.
Everybody over there, that direction, I'm talking to everybody, right?
Yes, can you, yes, up to the podium perhaps, and can you comment? Date on this is the 7th, 2017.
That's what happens. Anyway, we'll have Cecil is here now.
Yeah, okay. Yes, sir.
So what is the question?
The,
I'll ask the question.
Okay.
Sure, if you want. Are you familiar, have you had a chance to review the site coverage submission that the applicant has brought forth?
The one that we
this
just
evening?
received?
The one we
the
just
one
received.
we just received.
Glanced at it. I don't know that I've really been able to,
So this is the
Read
first
it
time
or
you're seeing
compare
it
it.
as well.
yes.
Any thoughts?
Well, the way the process works, as you well know, is this goes through planning board and all gets permitted that way before it even gets to me. Once I get it, I'm just making sure that the stamped engineering is first of all stamped by a registered, land surveyor or civil engineer. Those are the two options we have. And that it meets the compliance with the setbacks and things like that.
Okay, so I think, so if there was a site coverage issue, that would have been that should have been appealed to the, I'm just saying that should have been appealed to the
That's my
planning decision
understanding. We
several
could
months
ask,
ago.
the planning folks,
Right.
isn't
right.
that not?
We're trying to, right,
I'm
because
on-
we're trying to stay focused on this building permit that you issued.
No,
and
I'm
that
just
wouldn't have
trying
come into
to,
play.
this has been my understanding since I've been here, is
Right.
this is the process. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
it's right, wrong, or indifferent.
No, you're
This is
right.
the
You're saying
process
it
we
was
follow.
approved by planning. Planning is responsible for site coverage. You're going to the engineering drawings and the
And
setbacks.
I make sure that all of the appeals and everything are exhausted before it comes to me. So I'm not going to issue a permit where things are still pending.
Okay.
I want to make sure whatever appeals have been, whatever special permits have been, or variance has been, or sometimes the Board of Health puts conditions on things. I make sure all those, and in my description, if you look at the permit, under the description, usually I put in there what process was followed, whether it was planning board approval, Board of Health approval, whomever, whichever board is involved before it even gets to me. I make it very clear.
Okay, thank you, Cecil.
May I make a comment on what I
Oh,
think-
absolutely, yes.
on what I think is the origin of these changes and why the permit is higher. And it really relates to what Mr. Zender was speaking to on basement coverage and how you look at site coverage. When I looked at, comparable units, again, Mr. Doolittle's property here has a built-in basement area of about 331 square feet, actually maybe 338. And I believe that was included in the permit appropriately because it is 100% visible from the standpoint of the betters. We look at a 3-story building in the back, and there is a garage permitted on there. It's not considered a basement. It's considered part of the site. And so that's why I believe the permit is actually accurate and should have included this in the site coverage. And that's why it's now over on site coverage. So I just found it Tuesday.
Yeah. My opinion, my feeling is that this would have been something to have appealed back to planning, the planning decision. It should have come up at the October ZBA appeal that you had on planning. It would have been something I
I
would have been
just
happy to
found it
look
when
at.
I saw the permit. So this is a permit protest, right? And it's.
Can you give us a date when you found this?
I found it Tuesday when I was trying to go. look at-
Tuesday of this week.
Last
week.
week. Yeah, but I mean, it's on the permit. It seems like it's almost a fraud. It should have been brought back. If you're over the site coverage and you know about it, it seems like the contractors should have brought this forward and remanded it back to planning. It really does.
So you're saying you found this on February 3rd?
We could go tomorrow.
Somewhere a week ago, but
Yeah.
what can I say? It is on the permit. It is reality. It does reflect, I think, an overage and maybe an oversight on the part of the contractor or just I don't know why it wasn't. Somebody who filled out that permit, saw that it was over the site coverage limit, probably should have remanded it back to planning. But nobody caught it, except me.
Well, then perhaps, as Mr. Ridge is suggesting, you should go back to planning.
The appeal is over for that. The appeal window.
If that would be appropriate, I would accept that because I think it should be.
I don't know if it would be. Paul, what would you think?
I guess I'm still trying, I don't understand the argument that you're making about the site coverage. It's over the site coverage.
Okay,
The
well,
approved site coverage was 3,569, 11%. This property could go to 12%, which maximum site coverage would be 3,891 square feet, 12% of the lot area.
no,
That's what the site coverage is. That's what the building permit was issued on. It's not over the site coverage.
okay.
That's what's on the
26
stamped
permit.
site plan.
It's right here, it's right here. It's right here, and it's not those numbers. That's what the problem
I
is.
don't, what is that sheet?
This is the page 14 from the permit.
I,
Oh, I'm sorry, it's in this patent.
I don't have that.
through you, Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I look at
No, that's fine.
which page,
The very first page after the summary
this?
is the permit.
Okay, so if I may, Madam Chair, I'll address this.
Yes, please.
This page,
In the permit, yes.
Yeah, this is not the site coverage that corresponds to the building permit that was issued. This is a site coverage calculation sheet that was submitted during the original building permit, before any of the regulatory process played out.
Okay, you're talking about the building
this-
permit
yes.
for the house
Yes.
at 420 Meetinghouse?
No, this is for this looks like it was for the garage, but this wasn't the same sheet that it went with the permit that was issued.
You're saying this was their first draft submission
Right.
sort of thing?
So it would make sense if this doesn't match up, because this,
Maybe this
and it
was
really
over.
doesn't matter,
The
because this
regulatory
wasn't-
process brought it down.
this isn't the site coverage calculation sheet that went with the permit that was issued. The permit was issued based on the planning board approval, which is based on the site plan that was stamped by a certified engineer, and which says that the site coverage ratio is 11%, where it could actually go to 12% if they wanted to.
Okay.
Okay, hang on here, this should have included this 356. It was in the documentation I had, and it's over. I mean, it's over, and this is a huge building. It's 42 by 34 on a teeny little oblong lot. And I really think that whatever they put in there, now, these are the other ones that went into the planning board, I agree. But this is just not right. It's just not accurate. It should by the bylaws, and because it's not a basement, it's a separate thing. It's right on this site card. It's a separate additional,
Just, Velma, just one point, not to go unchallenged. It's not a teeny little oblong lot. It's
Well,
over 32,000 square
okay, well,
feet, which
it's
makes
on
it,
where I
which makes
see
it larger than most lots in town.
okay, it's just that it's very close to our lot line.
Yeah.
So I do.
That's a different
I do think
issue.
it's a material discrepancy, probably.
The closeness to your lot line is a different issue.
Well, that's why we're
That's
talking
the
about setbacks.
setbacks.
Yes.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair, may I?
Yes.
Thank you. I just want to clarify on the first page of tonight's submission, the addition of that 356 square feet for the built-in garage, we're talking about the garage that's on the back end of the house
Very
at the
visible
basement
everywhere.
level. It is also by our definition a basement, which is not included in site coverage.
Actually, I think it is different. The basement depends on the view, and I do have that bylaw that I had quoted here. So it's not really a basement. It's a built-in garage. Where was my? But I think it depends on the visibility of the garage. It is 100% visible to us. It's also visible to the side. So if you go by the definition of the basement in section 21 of the bylaws, I don't believe it is a basement. It is another garage, and it is visible to us. We look at a 3-story monolithic building in the back. And now he wants to put, a 42 by 32% garage on there. And I just think it was maybe disingenuous not to include that 356, which was on this original submission. I don't even know, I apologize if this was not in the final permit. I don't think I ever got the final permit, but, I mean,
Velma, what were you referring to as why does the basement count as the
or
garage?
not, let's go to.
Are you talking about the town's zoning bylaws or the
Yeah,
state
zoning bylaws,
building
site
code?
coverage, of course, it excludes basement areas.
Just give me a section number so we can get on the same
12
page.
definitions, basement.
12 what?
To section 21 definitions way in the back, defining a basement. Okay, so that portion of a building which is partly below and partly above grade and having at least 1/2 of its height below grade. But actually, it's 100% of its height is above grade and visible to abutters as a 3-story building.
I did do some research on this topic recently because of the previous project. And where the 50% calculations come in, that it seems clear to me that 50% you don't just count that facade, you count the entire building. And where 50% of the lower level, let's use that term, if 50% of the lower level walls are below grade, this is from the state code, then that counts as a basement. And I think you're looking at one full, we have houses all over town, including my own house, that has a walkout basement, because I have 3 sides that are underground, similar to, I believe this house is close to 3 sides underground as well. So back to Jackie's point, it counts as basement space, which doesn't count towards, either, we're getting sidetracked anyways on this topic of this. And I just wanted to make sure I was reading the same thing you were.
Okay, any more comments or questions from the board? Let me open the meeting to abutters and people in the audience if there's something that they would like to say. Anyone? All right, I will close the public comment.
May I have
se-
one statement, just in summary?
Oh,
What's
absolutely.
actually because there is a long history on changes of elevation and whether or not a prior board, we never know what a prior board might have allowed to do for elevation changes, et cetera, et cetera. This first floor of the Doolittle garage is 2.7 times higher than the average ADU and garage in the area. The proposed two garages were 2.2 times the first floor area at 25 Deepwood, which is enormous. And I'd hope you had reviewed that. The first floor area, the second floor, Doolittle garage, which includes the basement, is 1.7 times larger than the first floor at Deepwood. It's an enormous building. The volume size of the second garage would be approximately 1.9 times larger than that at 25 Deepwood. The proposed garage space, let's see, the future simple, Anyway, it's enormous, and it's actually, if you really can visually understand it, it's larger than the one at 1400 Nauset Road, which is a really enormous accessory building on probably a 5-acre lot. So this is 20, but the one you're proposing is 20% larger, only 10% wider. And no matter how many times someone says it's just going to be nestled into existing topography, it's actually being jammed into artificially created topography, cliffs on one side, walls on the other. And it seems like consideration of that should have been made, especially since we had no way to, at any point, protest changes in elevation of 7 feet on one side, creation of artificial ground on the other side. That's the only reason this fits in to this area, because so many changes in topography were allowed without any restrictions on Mr. Doolittle. He just had family equipment, and now he's going to build an enormous size building. It's really going to harm people, really going to harm people. So I actually don't even understand why the lack of consideration for how this occurred, this history, and how we were all denied our due process rights.
I'm sympathetic to your concerns. There are so many things that you have brought before us in the previous meeting and this one tonight that we really don't have any control over. That's not to say that we don't appreciate your concerns. I believe we do. But as far as modifying or canceling the building permit, I don't think this board can do that.
Can you remand it back to planning now that you really understand these changes and know that we haven't had any due process rights?
I think that might be something that you yourself would have to pursue. The other possibility might be to go the route of the court system and file a civil suit.
Yeah, it's very, very expensive, and I believe that is possible because the building code violations and the reckless excavation. But I would think that the board would not want to force someone into litigation. There
I
certainly should be some
am not
humanity.
trying to do that. I am simply saying that is another course of action
Yes,
for you.
it's
If you
devastatingly
choose it.
Yes.
I understand that it's very expensive. But at this juncture, I don't think this board can do anything except approve what the building permit has allowed.
I think we're simply not changing what the building
Well, we're
Department has
going to
allowed.
vote on this yet, so, but I'm just saying for yourself.
Yes,
you know.
yes.
We're not here to approve what they've done. That's all I'm making
No,
clear.
no, but our task tonight was to modify or cancel
Building permit.
the building permit. So, let me take a straw vote. How about that? Justin?
Anybody else in the public first?
We just closed the public
Okay, thank you.
part.
I don't see any legal standing to modify or cancel the permit.
Okay. Bob?
I would say no action is what is required.
Yeah, I would agree. We would move to deny the appeal.
Okay. And Martin?
Probably the same.
All right, and I have to agree with that. So may I have a motion to, how do I word this?
Isn't it deny the appeal?
To deny the appeal to modify or cancel the building permit. A motion, please, someone?
I'll move that we deny the appeal.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay. I'm going to take a count on the vote. Justin?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Doug?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
And I say aye as well. So the vote is 5-2.
That giant building
Nothing.
there.
Pardon me?
We'll all live with that giant building there, surrounded by rings of retaining walls.
I'm sorry, sir, in the back. We've closed the time for public comment. Okay.
Thank you.
Our next order of business is to approve the minutes from the January 8th meeting. If no one has corrections, may I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Bob, okay, and
I'll second that.
Martin, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 5-0 on that one. And a motion to adjourn.
I will so move.
Okay, Bob, Martin,
I will second.
You get
My
second.
second spot all night.
and a vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Very good job, good job.
That was a toughie.